Hello friends, I am JCM Berne, author of Wistful Ascending. Welcome to my channel. This is Book Burning, a show where I talk about books and comics, sometimes movies, anything else that comes to mind, but I promise to never ever burn a book. And today's topic comes thanks to my second and probably last ever Twitter poll. I'm recording this in, I think it's April. Yeah, April of 2023, and apparently there's been changes about how Twitter polls work. You don't care about that, and you don't need to hear about it from me, but it may never happen again. But as we all know, Twitter polls are legally binding, so I have to do this topic, which is fine. I was happy to do it, about talking about why, well, there's several titles. What I put on the Twitter poll is simply why indie or why self-pub. But I think I'm going to go further than I'm going to say why indie and self-pub are better than traditional publishing. You heard it here first, maybe, I don't know, but I'm going to say it and I'm going to prove it. Or maybe not. You'll see. You have to watch the video. Okay, so first things, as always, what do I mean by indie or self-pub? And I'm gonna try to wrap those two together into a lump, because otherwise it just gets very complicated and annoying. I'm just going to talk about, I'm going to say self-pub, but I mean also indie, and trade is two different things. So what do we mean by traditional publishing? Traditional publishing is where an author writes a book, the author then finds an agent somehow, usually you query, which means you find lists of agents who work in your genre, and you send them letters with a pitch. It's like a couple sentences from your book, maybe a short description, and they go, oh, that most of the time they take that letter and they throw it. They bin it, as we say, as people would say in England, right? They just throw it in the trash. Every once in a while, you have a pitch, a sentence that strikes their fancy, and then they go, it made me. And then they say, send me the first 3 chapters, or they say, send me the whole book. You mail them the book. Well, now you email them. A few years ago, you would actually literally print it, send it in an envelope. And then your agent then reads it, and if they take you on, which they usually don't, but if they do, then they go to all the different publishers. They know editors these are acquiring editors at the publishing houses, the big houses. In sci-fi fantasy world, we think of people like Tor, Bane, Orbit, Gallant. I'm sure I'm leaving some out. It's not a complete list, but the big ones, and then they pitch the book to an editor at one of those houses. One of those houses picks up the book, or doesn't. Maybe none of them do. But if someone does, they get an actual editor for you, meaning someone who maybe says you have to change a few things. We want you to take out the middle, whatever. Then they send it to a copy editor. You go back and forth with some changes. You do some rewrites. They send it to another person who does a copy editing. They look for typos. They send it to a typesetter. They pay. They usually pay you in advance. You get money up front, not a lot, but you get some. Before they sell the book, they're paying you. They're saying, we like this so much, you're paying you up front. They hire a cover artist. They do your marketing, which means they design whatever advertising there is comes from them. Orbit is hiring the cover artist. They're hiring the marketing people. You may have your own Twitter account. You may be publicizing yourself, but you're not the one doing that. And then but because these companies have connections, that sounds very sinister. I didn't mean it to be sinister, but they have connections. Your book can end up on a bookstore shelf. It usually does. If you're a new release from Tor, you're going to get picked up. You can walk into Barnes & Nobles and your book will be on a shelf. And that's what we call, or what everyone calls traditional publishing. That's the traditional model. And if you go back, I don't know exactly how long, 15, 20 years, that's like the only way genre fiction pretty much got done. That's not entirely true, right? There was self-publishing has existed for a very long time. Self-publishing is where instead of that, you go and you don't do that. Any way that books get sold that isn't traditional publishing is indie, independent of the traditional publisher. It's kind of what indie means. So typically what people mean by indie is, indie could be going to a very small publishing house. There are often publishing houses so small, they can't afford to give you an advance. They don't really have marketing. They might not be able to get your books into bookstores, or not many bookstores. They don't have the kind of reach that a place like Tor, Orbit, or Gallant has. Bane, Rock, I don't know if Rock is still around. I'm thinking of publishers that I knew back when I was a kid. A lot of these are owned by the same parent company. They've been bought and sold. Some of them are not there anymore. It gets complicated. And I'm not an expert on the industry to the point where, I remember all these things. That's not my shtick. Okay. So self-pub is where you do all this yourself. So I'm self-pub, right? So basically, instead of me going to Tor and finding an agent who sold my book to Tor, I decided myself, I'm going to release this. And I hired my own cover artist and my own editors and created my own product by myself. And I distributed it through Amazon, but Amazon's not a publisher, right? Amazon didn't pay me. They didn't check the book to see if it's good or not. They're not marketing my book. All Amazon is like the bookstore. Amazon isn't like the publisher. And this isn't a critique of Amazon. I'm just saying that's the role it plays. Amazon also, I think it used to publish, but it doesn't anymore. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. It's not important. But when self-pub self-pub has been happening for a long time. People used to self-pub. They would write a book. They would go to find a printer on their own, print a bunch of copies, keep boxes of the book in the trunk of their car, and go to like conventions, meetings of people, and hand sell copies of their book. That's another kind of self-publishing. Before digital books became a thing, that was really what you did. I've never done that myself, but that was self-pub. Okay, and then having a very small publisher who doesn't have much reach, I'm going to lump in with self-pub. So indie, self-pub, I'm going to lump those together because it's easier. You get the same very much the same or similar advantages and disadvantages to indie versus to a very small publisher as to doing it yourself. Not the same exactly, but very close. Okay, so then the topic of the video is why indie? And I realized I'm very dumb. After doing the poll, I realized I wasn't specific at all in how I wrote the poll, because I said why indie, but I didn't say distinguish between why read indie versus why publish indie. I didn't. So am I addressing a reader and saying if you're a reader, you should try giving indie books a chance, or am I addressing authors? And I wasn't clear, so I am forced by the rule of law, again, Twitter polls are legally binding according to Elon Musk, and who am I to argue? So I'm going to have to cover both. And I don't think I have a ton to say about either of these things. I have something to say, but not a ton. So this isn't going to be like a 3-hour video. You can check, it's YouTube. You can look down in the corner. You can see how long it is. It's not going to be crazy long. I have more to say about other topics, but not this one. This one shouldn't be too bad, I hope. We'll see. Okay, so I'm going to start with why. I'm going to talk to readers and reviewers first. And I'm going to lump readers and reviewers together because in a certain way, well, I probably have some specific things to say to either, but let's start with readers. Why should you read an indie book? And this is another one of those cases where when I say why should you read an indie book, I'm almost arguing with someone, but there's no one there. It's YouTube. I'm looking at my phone right now. So you might be watching this and thinking, well, I have to argue against something. So I have to sort of imagine what the other person in this argument is saying, what their argument is, like why someone would say, why, I don't want to read an indie book. Indie books are blank, or I think of indie as blank. So I have to imagine what they might say and counter it, as opposed to just say, well, they're books. Why wouldn't you read them? Like, that's not very satisfying. So I have to imagine that some reader has an image of indie or self-pub, and I'm arguing against that. But since I don't have an actual person in front of me, I have to make up their position, which might not be fair, but I'm not speaking to any specific individual, so I think you can sort of get what I'm trying to work with here. So what I imagine is going on is that someone is saying to themselves, they're saying self, Tor and Galance and Orbit release a bunch of books every month, more books than I could ever read. This is true. Okay, so the person saying this is right. So those books are books that have been handpicked from all the books being written by editors and agents, editors meaning acquiring editors and agents of the highest skill, the people at the top of their profession. Presumably, the acquiring editors at Tor are the best. They're the people who know best what a quality book is. They're the people who have specialized skills in finding good books, quality books, fun books. If you watch my other video about quality versus fun, I mean either or both. I mean, depending on which company and what they're publishing. So the person might say, well, they're the best in the industry. They're professionals at finding books that people will like. That's literally their job. So why wouldn't I trust them to screen all the books that come out, find the best, and pick them? And the only reason I would go to an indie book that didn't get picked up by Tor or Golance or Orbit or Bane is if presumably I've already read all the releases from those other companies and I've gotten to the bottom. Now maybe I'd start scraping for indie books that didn't make the cut. You can think of it as like a cut, right? And that's how many people, I believe, think about self-published books. And I think that's part of why people are loath or reluctant to read them, or they skip over them, or maybe that's fine, but it can't be as good as what the big houses are publishing. And I understand that argument. I mean, I understand the point of view, but it's wrong. End of video. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to say a little more. It's wrong. And here is why it's wrong. So you might think, that the editors at Tor are the ones who are best at picking out like a book that I'm going to enjoy. But the fact is, they're kind of not. And what they are is, they're the best at picking out a book that their publisher, that whoever they answer to, their chief acquiring editor, whoever's in the business room at Tor, is going to appreciate the most. And to a certain extent, they're good at picking out books that they can sell. They are good at picking, because what makes an acquiring editor at Tor keep their job, right? You have to think about what's going to keep them there, what's going to get them the raise or the promotion, or just have them stay in the job. They need to be able to find and pitch books to their boss that their boss thinks are good books, good or worthwhile books in whatever sense that they mean. They could mean literary good, they could mean fun good, and they're being judged by how well that their company can sell the books, which doesn't necessarily mean the books that most people want to buy. It's whatever books the Tor marketing department is good at giving to the public. And if you look at what Tor's release, Tor is very literary. Like, a lot of their stuff is, they have not a lot of like pulp, just fun books. They have a lot of literary stuff. They have a lot of stuff that's like, winning awards, and that's great. And if that's what you like to read most, if you are looking for the most literary experience you can have in all of your reading or most of your reading, you might have the best experience picking books that Tor has published. You might find that your interests align with the publisher at Tor. Maybe. But it's highly possible that you don't. It's highly possible that there are other sort of books that you are going to find more fun. And you might be saying, like, sure, Joe, you're saying this because your book wasn't picked up by a publisher and you think your book is great. Yes, that is true. But that is not my entire argument. You can see that I'm right by looking at the fact that there are entire genres of books that are very popular, that people love, that are best sellers, that make a ton of money, that the big publishing houses don't touch. Lit RPG, cultivation, fantasy, things like Cradle. You can't find them at Tor. You can't find them at Golance or at Orbit. These companies aren't printing lit RPG. But there are lots of people who really love that stuff, and you can tell by just going to Amazon and checking out the sales figures for some of the top titles. It's not that hard. If you see a book on Amazon and it has 10,000 ratings, it's sold 100,000 copies. That's a lot of books. You can compare top Cradle books, the Cradle books by Will Wright. You can compare them to some traditionally published books, and you can see they're selling better. People like them more. Go on to forums. Go check people who read fantasy. Do some people like the Tor releases more than Cradle? Absolutely. But lots of people prefer Cradle. If the Tor editors had some magic way to find the best books for every reader, or even for most readers, and pick those out of the stream of whatever comes across their way, if the editors working in conjunction with the agents, working in conjunction with the publisher, had a way to find the books that people really want to read, they'd be printing them. But they're leaving money on the table. They're leaving lit RPG money on the table. Why? Because they don't really know how to handle that. Maybe they don't know how to pitch it to their publisher. Maybe they don't really understand that RPG, which is a weird genre. I mean, it's weird to me. I don't understand it. I'm not criticizing them for not understanding it. I don't either, but lots of people love it. They maybe they don't know how to market it. They're marketing. They know how to market certain kinds of books. That's the kind of people who work in their marketing department know how to market certain kinds of books. Do they know how to market a lit RPG? Do they know how to market a superhero story like mine? I don't know that they do. Tor doesn't publish superhero stories unless they're deconstructions. Sort of taking apart the superhero genre, twisting it around, making it more literary. It's not what I write. I don't think they'd have any. Tor, if I'm wrong, if you want to publish Wistful Ascending, call me. My DMs are open. I'll happily take a Tor contract any day of the week. Orbit, go on, same thing. But they're not publishing books like mine, but there are certainly people who like those books. The other thing is, Orbit and Tor, they're not going to publish a book that's only going to reach a small number of people. But a book that might have a very small audience because of its, what it's trying to do, you might be the person who's in that audience. There's a reason Travis Baldree self-published Legends and Lattes first before it went to a big publisher. The publishers didn't really believe that it was going to be as popular as it was. Travis didn't believe it was going to be as popular as it was. I've heard interviews with him. I'm pretty sure he has said that. If I'm wrong, excuse me. But they didn't know that cozy fantasy was going to be a big thing, so they passed on his book, or he didn't even pitch it to them. After it became hugely popular, then it was picked. I don't know who picked him up. I can't remember, but he was picked up by one of the major publishers. If you buy Legends Lattes now, it's from a major publisher because they saw that it could sell because it sold. But they're not finding the next new thing. They're not finding the next innovative thing. That's not how publishing works. They're looking for the thing that most closely resembles their last big seller. And if you talk to editors of publishing companies, if you listen to interviews with them, that is what they say. They admit it. They're not looking for innovation. Harry Potter barely made it to publication, right? She pitched it to a bazillion people. Why? Because it wasn't like stuff that was selling at the time. It broke new ground. So if you're a reader and you want something new, and you want something fresh, and you want something interesting, you want something different from everything else that's on the shelves, you're not going to get it from Tor. I mean, maybe you will, but odds aren't great. Where are you going to get it from? You might get it from someone like me. How are you going to find the good book, right? Because if you just here's the dark side of it. If you just go to Amazon and you look for things that don't have a traditional publisher and you just start buying them and reading them randomly, you probably will have a suboptimal experience of reading that, because most self-published books are crap. They really are. Because there's no gatekeeper. Anyone can publish a book, so anyone does. And most of them are terrible, because that's what happens. And I'm not saying mine are great. I mean, I will say that. But I mean, you don't have to believe that mine are good to believe that most. If you don't believe me, you can just go find random indie books, find ones with, So how are you as the reader going to find? So hopefully, what you want is to read the indie books that are good for you. How are you going to find the indie books that are good for you? And that's where you have to go to the reviewers. You have to go to the BookTube. You have to go to Goodreads. Find people who like stuff that you like. Follow their reviews. Have friends. Go on Discords about people who read. And it doesn't take that long on Reddit before someone's going to recommend Cradle to you. It's not going to take that long on Reddit. And if you love Cradle, which I do, I mean, it's not good, but I love it. You'll find other things like that. You can get shown in those directions. There are plenty of podcast interviewers. It's not as simple as just picking up everything, looking at everything Tor puts out and going, I'm going to pick this book this week, this book this week, this book this week. It's not so simple. And that's one of the downsides of reading indie is there's just a lot of choices and most of them are bad. But there are some amazing books. You can just start by going to SPIFBO. Read all the SPIFBO finalists from last year. Or look at all the SPIFBO finalists from last year and pick the ones that sound good to you. Start from there. Pick those. Look at their Goodreads. Look at their ratings. Oh yeah, go to Goodreads. Read the ratings. If you want to look at Goodreads for Wistful Ascending, look at my ratings. Look on Amazon ratings. Give yourself a cutoff. Not every bad rating really means it's going to be a bad book for you, but if a book has a 3.7 versus a 4.7, there's a decent chance that the 3.7 is either not that great or that it's marketed poorly. And it's hard to tell. Sometimes those books are fantastic. Wait for someone to tell you to read it. That gets complicated. How to find the best indie books for you is not simple, but there's a really good chance so many indie books come out of such varying quality, including high quality, that unless what you love is exactly what the people at Tor or Orbit or Galance love, which is unlikely because you're a different person, it's much more likely you will be able to satisfy your reading desires better by going to indie than by sticking to what you can find at Barnes & Noble. Indie is better for almost everyone. Again, unless your tastes exactly match the tastes of one of those companies, which is unlikely because you're a different person. Unless you're there, you are probably going to have better experiences by picking the right indie books. You can try mine. I strongly recommend them. I think they're great, but that's not the point. Okay, so that's why I think you should read indie. Again, you do it right, I think you're more likely to have a better experience. So why should one write indie? Okay, so now I'm talking to writers. Now I'm talking to authors, fellow writers. And the first thing I'm going to say is, guys and gals, if you can get a traditional publishing contract, take it. And there are people in the indie community who will disagree with me. I think Tiago Abdallah has said that he prefers indie publishing because of the control, his level of control. He gets to decide his marketing. He gets to decide his release schedule. He gets to pick the cover. He gets to pick the marketing materials. He gets to decide on the price. He gets to decide on who gets an arc. There's so much more power you have over your releases. And control is super important to an indie writer. So, for example, I am trying to write a long series. As an indie, a self-published author, no one can cancel me after 3 books. Tor is not going to call me after book 3 and say, sales are down on book 3. We're not signing you for book 4. Your series is over. That literally can't happen. There is no Tor, right? I'm releasing them. I get to decide when I stop. I get to decide what my marketing is. If I had given my book to, sold my Hybrid Helix to a publisher, they might have advertised it as having a South Asian main character. They might have made those words prominent on the marketing, maybe, and I would have found that personally morally offensive for reasons that I've talked about and why I made Rohan brown. Like, I don't want that in my. I'm proud of the fact that I made Rohan South Asian, but I don't ever think my book should be marketed that way for reasons I'm not going to talk about now. But I wouldn't have been able to stop them, like, unless I had a lot of control. At a certain level of sales, if you can achieve a certain level of success, it gets complicated, right? Like, let's say, so if I sold 100,000 books and I did it myself, I'd make this much money. If I did it through Orbit, I'd make this much money. That's a weird comparison. I'd probably make more money self-publishing if I could sell 100,000 books, right? But would a 100,000 book self-published seller, would a self-published 100,000 copy seller have sold 1 million copies if it came from Orbit? That's a question no one really knows the answer to. So you don't really know how much money you're going to make either way. But you have total control of your merchandising. You decide who your audiobook narrator is. You get to decide all these things for yourself if you're an indie self-publisher. And that is phenomenal. I still think if you can get a traditional contract, if Tor is calling you, take it. And the reason is, we still live in a world where a tremendous swath of the reviewing and buying public only takes seriously books from major publishers. So if you look at what, like, so you look at, like, the channels, the YouTube channels where they're reviewing indie books, and I love these guys. I'm not going to start naming people. I would like to, Andrews Wizardly Reads, I have to say, because he was one of the first people to talk about Wistful Ascending. There's so many, I'm going to stop. They're great channels. The channels that focus on indie books, like Patrick Lako, I'm going to mention because he's one of the biggest ones who talks about indie books a lot. But Patrick has a little over 20,000 subscribers. Now you look for the BookTube channels where they have like 100,000 subscribers, and they're mostly talking about traditionally published books, which makes sense. Those are the ones that have the widest distribution, that can reach the widest audience, that can get them the most views. And that's fundamentally what, to a certain extent, drives BookTube, right? You want more views. You're not trying to cover the book that no one cares about. You're trying to cover the book that everyone's read. Murphy Napier isn't reading a lot of independent stuff. I'm not going to say none. I don't know her channel well enough, but the people with the broadest reach are looking at what Tor comes out with and what Orbit comes out with. They're not looking for people like me. I got a tour contract, I would be on the radar of a lot of very popular people who can sell a lot of books, who can who could have a much broader reach, and in a very mercenary way. That's why I say if you can get a tour contract, take it. If you can get an Orbit contract, take it. Go on, take it. Right? They have reach. They can get your books into every Barnes and Noble in the world. As an indie author, can you get your books into bookstores? You can, but it's a stretch and it's hard. Now, can you be a super successful independent author? Absolutely. Will Wright makes a ton of money selling Cradle books. He doesn't have a tour contract. I don't even know if he wants one. He just came out with a new series. I don't even know if he tried to pitch it to a major publisher. He's got a big enough name now that I don't even know if he should take it. And if you have a fan base already, you probably don't need tour as much. I'll give you another example. Philip Chase. Philip Chase came out with a book, Way of the Dawn. If you don't know Philip Chase, you should know. If you know who I am, you should know who Philip Chase is. You should have known that a year ago. Anyway, he has a very popular BookTube channel. Great guy, super channel. Absolutely, you should watch him. Came out with a fantasy book that he's been working on forever, Way of the Dawn. I've heard only great things about it. He's a guy who, just by the fact that he's known in the community and he has friends with all the top, people like Patrick, these people who have these big channels are all, happy to read his book, and if it's good, pitch it, and talk about it on their channels. He has these connections that I don't have, right? I mean, I'm not Philip Chase, but I have more connections now. My next book, I know, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I know I can get it into the hands of a number of reviewers, people with sizable channels, but not like what Philip Chase can do. If you're a famous person in any capacity, you can probably self-publish it and be much more productive. Then you don't need the contract from a big publisher. If you're a professional athlete, if you're a politician, whatever. So that there are exceptions to my general rule of if you can get a big contract, take it. But I still say, if you're an author and you can get one of those, you want to do that. But as an author, you also have to recognize who you are and what you're offering, what you're putting on the table, and whether that is going to get you a foothold in a place like, Tor or Orbit. And I felt, maybe wrongly, that I couldn't, that the kind of stuff I was writing wasn't, if I go through agents' listings and I went through publishers' listings and I looked at the kind of stuff that they were interested in, it wasn't what I was writing. They were not talking about me. And maybe I was wrong. I don't know. We'll never know. But, yeah. So, if you're a writer and you spend a little time thinking about it, try to figure it out. If you have a hard time getting an agent and you have a hard time getting a publisher, you can self-publish, and there are tremendous advantages to doing so. You lose out on a lot of access. You lose out on access to bookstores. You lose out on access to a lot of the reviewing community. But there's a lot of the reviewing community still left that will potentially take you seriously. It's a very supportive and much less cutthroat community. I gotta say, when I go to Twitter and read the tweets coming from traditionally published authors when they talk about the writing community and their experience in publishing. Compare that to the tweets from people like me, Taco Abdallah, or any other self-published author, the people on BookTube. Read our tweets, read how we talk about the world we live in and our professional world and the world of publishing as we see it. And the difference is amazing. Okay, real writers who have traditional contracts are always pissed off. They are always angry about something their publisher has done to them. Almost always. It is ridiculous. They all feel like it's very cutthroat and very irrational, and decisions get made and their power is taken away for no particular reason, and they all just sound always miserable and they can't wait to get out of it. And then you read the similar tweets from self-published writers, and we complain, we don't have the sales we'd like, sometimes things are hard, I've got to figure out how to use Canva to make my own ads, and it's a pain in the butt. Yes, but in general, our feelings of solidarity and our feelings we get from our community, from our professional environment, are so different. It's like amazing. So if you can't get a traditional contract, which you probably can't, because very few people can, Self-pub may be not as good in some ways, but there are tremendous pluses. And powers is nice. Like I said, I'm writing Shadow of Hyperion, book 4 of the Hybrid Helix right now, and no one can tell me not to release it. Like, it might be crap. I can't promise it won't be, but no one's going to be stopping me from publishing it. No one's going to say, can't do it. We're not going to support that. No one has to buy it, but no one can stop me from putting it out there. So that's kind of a nice feeling, and I know that if I'm doing this 10 years from now, I can still keep putting out books and no one can say no. So there's a lot to be said for that. And like I said, I get to pick my own narrator, and I get to make sure that nothing happens. I don't get a front cover I hate. That'll never happen. I can buy a front cover, and if I don't like it, I can be disappointed and I've wasted my money. I don't have to put it on the book. So I like that. Not that I have ever worried that my cover artist will give me a cover I don't like. Chris McGrath's amazing. But you see the point I'm trying to make. So why indie? As a reader, you actually have a better chance of finding books that work for you if you're willing to put in the work, which you should be, because you're going to have a better life for it. And if you are a writer, you'll probably have to be indie, and that's okay. You'll be fine, and you will find there are a lot of advantages to being indie and self-pub over a traditional contract. Although, if you can get a traditional contract, take it. That's the final word from me on why indie is better than trade. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you buy my books. I also hope you read them, and I also hope you like them and rate them on Amazon or Goodreads. And if not, I hope you find other books that you love that work for you, or other channels with videos that you love that work for you, because we all need some good stuff in our lives. And that's what reading is for. So take care, and thank you.